So, what's up, YouTube? What's up, Twitch chat? Playing some Esper Ketramose Frog Tide here. Just trying to keep grinding away at settling some of these mainboard and sideboard slots as we get closer and closer to RC Charlotte in a few weeks. No idea if I'm locked into Esper Frog yet, but I think Ketramose has been a really fun card to test out and wanting to do a little bit more to kind of push the limit, see its playability. In the main deck, we've got a lot of the same cards we've run in the last few videos. I'm going up to the 4th copy of Force of Negation, adding a Dreams of Steel and Oil to the main over the 2nd copy of Cling to Dust. The Force was over. I think it was the fourth Force in the Dreams over 2 Tameo, actually. In the sideboard, I'm trying out 2 Harbinger of the Seas. My thought here is with Eldrazi being really popular, especially online, and not really wanting Prismatic Ending in the matchup post board, there's an argument to cut the pendings, cut down on Ketramose, and bring in these Harbingers post board and just become straight Dimir and see how that works out for us. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Who knows? At least going to give it a shot. The rest of the sideboard got stuff like Stony Silence for Breach, 4 Consigned to Memory for Eldrazi with the Harbingers, 2 Surgical Extraction for any of the combo decks and pairs well with Ketramose, 2 Vanishing Verse for like Blink, but also deals with opposing Murktides, good into like Spelunking against Amulet, good into Boros, 2 Pest Control, mainly Boros and Breach, and a Nihil Spellbomb for a little extra Grave Hate. Let's just go ahead and hop in and see what we see. What are your thoughts regarding going to the Murkway versus Oculus Unearthed Shell? Not enough space. I think that the Murktide Shell does a much better job of making Ketramose good because you get more flex spots that can be more exile effects. But the Oculus Shell does a better job of getting Ketramose into play, but you might not be able to take advantage of it being in play as well, or you run the risk of just like not having exile effects. I guess kind of the same thing. In the blind on the draw, I don't really like this hand. I'd rather keep something more interactive. This is just like turn 1, do nothing, turn 2, frog, turn 3, Ketramose, and try to set up for like turn 4, draw some cards. And I'm a little hesitant on that. But we'll keep it and see what happens. We got games 2 and 3 to play with. If our opponent's playing anything like kind of fair, we could be okay. Forest Expedition map. So Tron, Amulet. Eldrazi. Ending. I do like the idea of a pending here because then if I Ketramose on 3, I could frog on 4, draw a bunch of cards, attack with the Ketramose. So I think we're just going to go after the Talisman here. Make them like spend their mana if they want to get a better land. Where if I go after the map, they can still play a 4-drop this upcoming turn. Guess I can play a 4-drop anyway. Never mind. I have no idea what's going on. Not even gonna front. I'm gonna play this fetch to get another card in the yard. So if I frog next turn, I got a few more cards available to ditch. I guess this could be like get a Eldrazi temple and have a Kozilek's command. That would kind of suck. Not that I could really do anything about it. What do we got? I'm just passing the turn back. Not a... If they've got a Kozilek's command, I'm not a huge fan of passing the turn there. Because I feel like that's kind of asking for trouble if you give me the chance to have the opportunity to draw cards. Not so much that card, but... I don't think I'm playing this other frog out. Kind of looking for force of negation, for counter spell. All right, well, could have been better. Could have been worse, but could have been better. In terms of power level, do I think Ketra is here to stay? I think there's a reasonable chance it is. It's a very solid card. I don't think it's like absurdly broken to the point that nothing's competing with it or anything like that. But I think it's a very good card. Urza's power plant. Okay. Can we kill? If I go ditch, 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 frogs up to 10, draw a card, ditch, ditch, so yeah. Can I kill With Thoughtseize, I don't think so. Yeah, I have to have the Thoughtseize. The discard, I mean. Nope. It's got Menace. Like, those kind of turns with Ketramose are kind of nutty. You just get to flip all of these cards into an insanely big frog. Obviously, doesn't always work out that way, but when it does, it's pretty cool. So we're going to try out this down on Ketramose, down on Pending plan against Eldrazi. I think I'll go... Maybe I want to keep in one more Ghost Vacuum. Or not Ghost Vacuum. I probably want to swap out a Ghost Vacuum for Spell Bomb. And maybe I want to keep in one more Ketramose. Or I could bring in a Stony Silence, but I don't really know what they're boarding into. We'll keep it Ketramose. I know that Harbinger shuts off casting Ketramose. The hope would be if I've got a Harbinger that I just play that out and it's able to run away with the game without needing the Ketramose. Opponent has mulligan to at least 5. We've got a Thoughtseize, so don't currently have black mana on turn 1. We'll figure that part out. Best draw would probably be basic Swamp. If I force, I've got to choose between forcing off the Preordain or the Murktide. I'm probably just forcing off the Murktide. Try to have Preordain turn 1 if I don't find an untapped black source for Thoughtseize. I feel like Devourer of Destiny doesn't get enough credit for how good it is. You see a bunch of like the showy payoffs in Eldrazi, like Kozilek's Command and Emrakul and whatnot. But like Devourer does a lot of heavy lifting, helping you find the Ugin's Labyrinth, being able to go under a labyrinth. I don't think they're going to play anything relevant on turn 2. There's our Harbinger. If we can land a frog next turn and then find another land for Harbinger, we could be smooth sailing. Okay. So now I'm changing up my plan pretty significantly. I was fairly dead set on Frog. Now that I've found the Marsh Flats, I'm more interested in Thoughtseize to try to clear the way for this Harbinger next turn. So we're gonna go Thoughtseize off the Verge. See if we can take something. If this is like a Kozilek's command to exile my Frog and make a couple spawn, then it just like negates the Harbinger altogether. But if I can Thoughtseize, take away something impactful, or if they have like 2 spells, maybe a Kozilek's command and something, and I get to consign the Kozilek's command, Thoughtseize the other card, give them like 1 turn to draw something, and then just slam the Harbinger next turn. Look pretty good. Okay. So you've got to top deck something pretty solid right here. Don't know the reason for putting the Devourer back in hand. But now you have no colorless mana. You have 1 colorless mana. I would love to Thoughtseize here in a perfect world, but I need to get the Frog down. Karn is annoying, but fine. I've got the Thoughtseize. I don't think they punish you this turn without access to 5 mana. Yeah, I don't think they punish me bad. The worst case scenario would be something like a Myco spawn, right? That last turn to go unlock their mana a little bit more, but I don't think most of these decks are running a waste. I don't know why they don't run a waste. Like, if you get green mana, you can just get your waste off of Myco spawn and have the ability to kind of freely set up your spells after that. What do you want me to do? Like, not hit runners? All right, we'll swing both at Karn. Take it out, draw a card. Play our land because Force Negation's pretty good at answering some random jank on their side. Force this because I can. They couldn't have done that turn. Well, I'm talking about just hard cast it. Like, just be able to redraw or to go get a land on their side. All right. I'm going to cling to dust and see if I want to discard a Frog. I gotta remember, I keep forgetting that I have Stern Scolding in the deck, like in the main, and I'm not boarding them out when I should be in the mirror match here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If they have a land is 6. So I'm counterspelling this, keep them off of double colorless. That makes Devourer much worse. This is 4, 5, 6. Put them to 8. I've got draw off the frog, draw off cling to dust, and draw for turn next turn. So I've got lethal. Yeah. No longer have lethal. Got a forest. Or no, we do have lethal now because they use the talisman. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Usually in these situations, it's so minor, it doesn't matter 99% of the time. But when you have a situation like this where your opponent has got an unknown card in hand, I would start. It's this minor little mind trick sequencing. I drew a counter spell. The counter spell can stop anything right here that would prevent me from killing them. Let's say they've got a fog. I don't know. I know nobody's running fog. Just imagine with me for a second that your opponent has a fog. I could just discard everything to the frog and go to attack. And if they have a fog, I say, well, damn, I can't kill them. And we go to the next turn. More than likely, it doesn't matter. I understand that. But if I start with just like discarding the first card, discard the second card, jump the frog, don't discard the counter spell, and attack, there's always the chance that my opponent just concedes here, and I don't have to worry about playing around anything by considering not throwing away my counter spell. Because my opponent just assumes I'm going to go for it here. So minor. I wouldn't worry about it in like 99% of scenarios. But if your opponent reasonably had something here that could interact and stop you, you might want to just start with discard, fly the frog, give them the intention that you're going to kill them while not discarding your counterspell until the last moment. And then you can decide, like, oh, they're F6, I'm going for it, or they're saying, yeah, whatever, I just discard the counterspell. My LGS, my opponent played a rip against me when I had Ketramose in play, had a spell snare in hand, let it resolve because it made my fetch lands and pushed both draw a card. We had some games yesterday or the day before where we had like Mill and I think Mill and Hollow One brought in Leyline of the Void against me. And both matchups, I had a Ketramose, exact same situation you're talking about, just fetch, draw a card, fetch again, draw a card. Prismatic ending your dude, draw a card. Oh, Ketramose is online. I didn't even have to do anything. Cool. Hit you for 4, gain 4. Definitely better with Rest in Peace, but same idea with the fetch lands. Tom Show and Cetapian, thank y'all so much for the follows. Hope you're both having awesome afternoons wherever you're at in the world. Appreciate you coming around and hanging out. But when your opponent's stuff just like makes all your things say draw a card, what do you want me to do? Not draw cards? Where Jund? Somewhere in the rental service. Somewhere over a rainbow. All right. Opponent's mulliganing pretty aggressively, so we're probably dead. Neo Evolution. Do we think that there's a chance that our opponent is actually on NeoBrand? Black white deck was already good. Jun needed Ketramose. What the hell was this? Opponent's on 4. Oh my god, they are actually on Neo form. God bless you, opponent. You're the hero this world needs. Like, I'm very, very sorry, opponent, that you ran into this particular matchup on a mold to oblivion. But God bless you nonetheless. Don't think that I don't respect your decision here. I don't even know what a current NeoBrand list looks like. They trophied with NeoBrand like 2 weeks ago. Heck yeah. Veil of Summers, Leyline of Sanctity. I could bring in Vanishing Verse for Leylines. Game's a little narrow. I could bring in Harbinger because it stops them from having any non-blue mana. They can't Eldritch Evolution or Neoform with a Harbinger out. Probably better than Prismatic Ending. That has like no targets. Consign hits. Bristlebrand. No. Endurance or Storin Flip. Seems kind of mid. I don't really have anything to replace Ghost Vacuum. Could bring in Stony Silence to stop Mox Amber. Gristlebrand's not a trigger. It's an activated ability to draw the cards. I can't interact with that, unfortunately. Did I bring in Surgicals? Yes. Okay. Seems fine. Fatal Push might kill a Sorin. About all I got for it. If I had more stuff to board out, I think Fatal Push would be a pretty quick one to go, but I really don't know what I would bring in for it. Oh no. Oh no. Opponent mulling aggressively. They're down to 4. What are you looking for in a 4-card hand? Land, Allosaurus, 2 green cards, Neoform Veil. I think that's like the lowest amount of cards you can have that beats us. What do you think of Hole Breacher? Just like the card in general, or do I think they should print Hole Breacher into Modern? We're talking just like Hole Breacher in general as a card. I think Hole Breacher is pretty sweet. Do I think they need to print it into Modern? Probably not. There's Windmill slamming a frog. Croak, croak. Like, Hole Breacher's a super fun cube card. All right. I think we're going to go for the Harbinger here. I've got... totally said the wrong card name. I mean, that could change up the entire conversation pretty drastically if that's not the card you meant. All right. GLHF. Doorkeeper Thrall. Okay, that is an exponentially different Magic card. What do I think of Doorkeeper Thrall? I think it is very reasonable. The downside to Doorkeeper Thrall, the fact that it can get Fatal Push is a very real consideration. I don't think it's like enough of a consideration to not play it if you're in, say, an Unearthed Oculus shell already, but just something to be weary of. I usually tend towards wanting Torpor Orb just because I want less interaction for my like Haymaker sideboard piece. But Doorkeeper Thrall being like, it's got flying, doesn't it? It's like a 2/1 flyer. Thrall. 1/2 flyer. So I mean it can kind of attack. But honestly, I'd probably, if you're on an Unearthed build of Oculus, then I think Doorkeeper's a lot better. But if you're not on an Unearthed build, I think I would rather lean towards Torpor Orb just to make sure your answer into black-white is not getting pushed. That being said, Doorkeeper Thrall does have the additional text of artifacts don't trigger as well. So it can be used against like Breach. Play it out, and their artifacts don't cause Grinding Station to trigger to untap. So it's got a little bit more matchup spread than Torpor Orb. Both coming in against like Titan. It's fine. I like it more in the Unearthed shells, but if you're not playing Unearth and you want an additional slot to bring in against Breach, then you could bring it in. But against black-white specifically, if you've got like 2 sideboard slots and you say, I want something for black-white and nothing other than black-white, I would probably run Torpor Orb over Doorkeeper Thrall just so it couldn't be fatal pushed. All right. Pending on 1, into Frog on 2, into Ketra Father on 3. Is this one of them their mirror matches? Oculus. Do we think they're on Esper, or do we think they're on Dimir? I think they're on Missing a Land Drop. Black-white play ending now that we have Ketramose. Are you talking about The End? Is that the name of it? Sequencing here. I want to get the Undercity Sewers first intentionally, because if I play my Polluted Delta on turn 2 and want to be able to fatal push, I can still get my Meticulous Archive. But if I get my Archive first and I want to fatal push on 2 off the Polluted Delta, then I would have to get a Watery Grave or a Swamp and give up my second Surveil land. Prismatic Ending for Torpor Orb. I don't know if they would play Prismatic Ending being a 2-color deck. They might, but I don't think that would be the most thrilling plan from them. They're on Missing Land Drop, no Unearth plan. Clearly. All right, so they are on Esper. Kept a card on top. Do we have a Ketramose? We do not. I'm going to keep a land on top. Kind of want to keep hitting lands if I can. I've got Counterspell, Fatal Push up. Hard cast an Oculus. Watery Graves, they could have a Spell Snare. I kind of want to go Counterspell, see if they Spell Snare, Fatal Push if they do, and then untap and have Ketramose. So good call on our side. Now let's play the Ketramose. And I think we'll go ahead and go for the Preordain, try to find like a Force of Negation. Feeling hot, hot, hot. Got a frog. Is this frog backed up by potentially a counter spell? Do I want to lead on Prismatic Ending in case I need to exile? All right. If I lead on Prismatic Ending, like Shock and Hallowed Fountain Prismatic Ending, and they counterspell, I can force back. That'll put an extra card in exile so that Ketramose can attack. If I lead on Fatal Push and they counterspell, I guess I can still frog. It gets a little dicey if I Fatal Push, they let it go, and counterspell my frog. So I think I'm going for pending here. This is like exile and draw a card. Force, exile, and Oculus. So now I just get punished for how I tapped. But Ketramose gets to attack. So let's attack with Ketramose. And we're going to go for Fatal Push on their upkeep. Cool. Didn't honestly think that was going to resolve. I thought that was like for sure counterspell. Maybe they still have a counterspell, but maybe not. Do that. There's a Ketramose. Here is a very large and in charge chunky Murktide that's going to draw a card. Yeah. Could be more Oculus in hand. I don't think that's a bad guess at all. Verse, pest control. Reverse spell. I'll hold off on verse until I know if they are if they're just Dimir, like splashing white. I don't know if they're Dimir splashing white for just pest control, in which case I might want Verse because it hits Oculus and Murktide that are both difficult to deal with. Or if they're Dimir splashing white for pest control and Ketra, then I don't want Vanishing Verse because they're less likely to have more Murktides. I do think I'm going to bring in Surgicals. I have to preface by saying I am not a big fan of Surgical in this matchup. But when I've got like Ketramoses to redraw to make these Surgicals like 0/1s instead of 1/1s, I like them a bit better. And the fact that my opponent's on an Unearth build leads me to be a little more inclined to board in Surgical. But I would never board them in like a traditional Murktide mirror. On a scale from yes to very, how busted is Ketramose? I think I believe what Misplaced Ginger said about it is kind of my opinion as well. It's like a very good card. It's not overwhelming because there are a lot of like deck building restrictions to it. I've seen some people say, oh, this is a Oko Uro power level card, and I don't think it's that. I think it's very much in the camp of like, hey, you're in kind of an even board state. This pulls you ahead really well. But I don't think it's in the you're behind and this just like top decks and wins you the game camp. And that's where I feel like Uro and Oko were. Uro especially. Playing with Uro, like Oko, if you were in a even board state and you land in Oko, you just win. Uro was more of you play this whenever. If you're ahead, you win more. If you're even, you win. If you're behind, you catch up and win. So that's what I think about with Ketramose. I think Ketramose, if you drop it on an even board, you probably have a good chance. If you drop it when you're ahead, you're winning more. If you drop it when you're behind, it's probably not catching you up. Just a super good value engine you can build around. Exactly. Like you do have to make a lot of considerations for things that exile or don't, things that have a little more or are main deckable exile effects or aren't. It's not just a free inclusion. Is this a better build for Ketramose than Oculus? We kind of had this question earlier, and I'm going to answer it to the best of my limited ability here. When you're comparing Ketramose in Murktide to comparing Ketramose in Oculus, you're kind of comparing the ease at which you can get Ketramose in play to the ease at which you can abuse Ketramose once it's resolved. I think that Ketramose in Oculus is really, really good at getting Ketramose into play. I don't think it's as good at abusing Ketramose once it's down. I think in Murktide, like traditional Murktide, it's better at abusing Ketramose once it's down. It's just not as good at getting Ketramose into play in the first place. All right. I'm gonna have to take a hit off this Murktide. Side note, can we agree that the set symbol for Aether Spark is god awful? It's kind of weird. Little racetrack symbol. Now, opponent having a turn 3 8/8 Murktide on the play is going to give us some fits. Not a whole lot I can do about that. So if their hand is just like this Murktide backed up by a bunch of interaction, never winning this one. So many frogs. So based on that, I would say it's better in this build because you use the card advantage. I would think so. Like, that's kind of where I would lean. Just getting Ketramose in play and having Ketramose attacking isn't the most overall impressive thing to be doing. But getting Ketramose into play, sculpting your hand off of a frog, and going from there is a lot better. All right, so I'm bringing in Vanishing Verse, and I'm boarding out Surgical. One thing that really excites me is if we see a return of traditional Murktide builds with Ketramose, then I feel like there's the possibility that we could see a return of playing or of choosing to take the draw, which is really cool. I think taking the draw in the traditional Murktide build, in the mirrors for the traditional Murktide build, is a big plus, but not against the Oculus builds. The Oculus builds kind of flip everything around a good bit because you don't want to be on the draw against like Unearth or Thought Scour into Unearth. But in the traditional Murktide builds, having access to like Stern Scolding, Spell Snare, Mystical Dispute for a turn 2 frog or Fatal Push, and the fact that nobody's likely to be slamming their frog anyway means the extra draw really adds up. Like right here, opponent's not playing out a frog. I don't even think I'm going to fetch in case they've got Bowmasters. But back to the traditional versus Oculus argument, I think that Murktide, like traditional Murktide, has really been lacking card advantage that Ketramose is pretty good at, and the ability to stabilize against some of the early pressure for things like Boros. And Ketramose kind of ticks both of those boxes pretty well, where Oculus suffers more from not being able to transition very well into a good mid-range deck, and Ketramose doesn't really help that because you're not enabling it as well. Raced, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. I'm gonna bend the surgical. Marfy, thank you for the follow as well. You're also having an awesome afternoon. We need a few less lands and a few more something to do. Oculus is just like going to the casino, pretty much. Like if you're playing Oculus, you need to be dedicated to the plan of I'm going to try to get this Oculus into play in an unfair manner. And I feel like more often than not, when people are playing Oculus, they're not trying to like cheat their Oculus into play. They're trying to play a very fair game, and it's not working out for them. But they just like don't have the tools to play that game plan. Sync is pretty decent. I've got an answer to a Murktide. Seems like opponents just kind of trying to buy some time. Maybe they've got a Murktide in hand that they want to resolve. That's probably it. They probably have a Murktide and they're wanting to like resolve a small Murktide, force me to do something about it. In your opinion, which is the best shell for a Tamiyo control deck? Just like an all-in on Tamiyo deck. Going for an Oculus here. Or are they going for? We're going for the Murktide. Just an all-in Tamiyo deck. Probably Jeskai, like probably one of the Flame of an Orb builds. Was it good to Nihil in response to the fetch? I mean, I could, but I didn't want to pop the Nihil yet. Fling to dust my surgical extraction. Sure. Thought sees you. I love that. Love that. Opponent clearly knows what's up. Catcher is a draw. You get punished for the Nihil. You do. But you don't want to just like throw away the cards without needing to. Like, I'm pretty happy here if my opponent just casts a Murktide because their Murktide's smaller than my Murktide, and I'm winning the race at the moment. Like, I knew they drew that swamp. They don't have any way to grow their graveyard right now. They just have a counter spell. Okay. Take my spell snare. I do flip over an Oculus, so I'm gonna have to spell bomb them, and they do get to grow their Murktide a bit. A little awkward. So good play out of them. Let's see if we can find something. Little too much blood out in the crucial stages. I don't think there's anything we can do in the face of them having the counter spell. They get to force the chump here. So a little bit of a variance finish there. Like, we had to crack the spell bomb because they hit the Oculus. Yeah. We had to crack the spell bomb because they thought scoured over the Oculus and then drew into the Consider to get another card in the yard for the Murktide. Like, it wasn't even the Murktide resolving that cost us there. It was that thought scour over the Oculus. Mirrors a crapshoot. It can be. There's plenty of times where you have a hand with like a stern scolding or a spell snare and a fatal push, and your opponent casts a frog, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, do I want to fatal push this frog and save my stern scolding or my spell snare for like a counter spell fight? But what if they have an unearth after this? If I fatal push this and they unearth it, I can't get any value out of my spell snare. But if I snare this and then fatal push after it's unearthed, I get to cover those bases. But if they have a counter spell, then I just used my spell snare for nothing. Back-to-back Oculus matches. Isn't Oculus supposed to be this terrible win rate deck that can't win at any of the RCs? Isn't that what we were told? Why is it out in full force? I was told the deck is dead. Nobody plays it. You're tier 27 now. Now we have another broken card. Nope. Never mind. I have no idea what's going on. We're doing preordain. Am I in the league or a challenge? I'm in the league. The leagues. I was playing the MTGO content creator showdown this morning, so I couldn't double queue with the challenge. Give me a card. Kind of want to just go ahead and get this frog online, but at the same time, if they kill my frog, I still have Ketramose. That's why you see frog, no one will take it to an actual tourney. I will. Absolutely will. Frog once more. I guess we can finally get some answers as to what they're doing if we thought sees. I was so expecting like discard or root walla there for some reason. Okay, so it's probably some sort of like Dimir Asmo deck. So we can expect a cookbook here. I think I should probably just take the monument. Right? Yeah, because they're going to have to lose a lot of cards for a Kappa Cannoneer. All right. Go to combat. Oh, no. Oh, thank you. Thank you, opponent, for screwing up and giving me a priority opportunity to draw a card off the frog and make sure this Ketra's live. I appreciate that. I was about to go straight to attacks before the Ketramose could. All right. Go ahead. How's Ketcher working out? I mean, seems kind of decent here. Let's say pithing needle my frog. Oh, cookbook, sure. Land, also sure. Yep. So they're at a virtual 12. Sitting at 7. Virtual 11. Go down to 8. Crack the food up to 11. They can't do anything else. So we should be able to kill here. Discard to 3. Draw up to 3. Discard down to 7. Discard like up to 7 power for the frog. Yay. I do like Catcher and Frog, but more in the Blink style shell. Or I do like Catcher and Frog, more in the Blink style shell. You're running the Dredge combo. I'm not running the Dredge combo. I think that Dark Blast in a vacuum is really bad. And the Dredge combo being non-deterministic and depending on things like who's got the higher life total, how many cards are in your library, is not where I want to be. If I'm going to run a combo, then the combo needs to get the game over with when I assemble the combo. It doesn't need to be like, oh, well, sometimes it combos and sometimes it doesn't. Like, no. So I just want surgical over ghost vacuum. Taking out Stern Scolding because it can't hit Asmo. I just not want either, really. All Ghost Vacuum I feel like it's doing is sniping or trying to snipe the bring back dude, which might just not be enough. That's how I feel. Piece of my LGS are hyped for the combo. I like mid-range grinding more. I just don't feel like you need the combo. If you've got a Ketramose and you got a frog and they're living, I promise you're okay without it. Like, I get the nut draw would just be turn 2 frog, turn 3 Ketramose, go off with the frog. Realistically, with a need to fetch, that turn 3 frog is probably going to start attacking when you're at, say, 17 life, assuming you had to fetch 3 times or fetch and shock once, 17, 18 life, with like 51 cards in library, which means you can add 17 power to the frog, and that's still not lethal unless your opponent has taken damage. And I just don't like that math. You think Ketramose was a mistake? Feels like Oko level. I don't think it's Oko level. I think having Ketramose and Frog together is Oko level, but I don't think Ketramose by itself is there. All right, I'm gonna take a cookbook. Tetra feels like beans. Yeah. I think it's like a little bit worse than beans. Not a ton worse, but enough because you don't have, like with Beanstalk, you resolve the Beanstalk and then you're immediately drawing cards off of Solitude or Fury or Force of Will or whatever. Ketramose still needs like another mana investment with it. So you need like a Frog with it or a Murktide with it, Prismatic Ending with it. It's not triggering. It can trigger off your Solitudes, but it's only like one actual Solitude deck in the format. Mox Opal. I don't think you need Dark Blast to be a combo kill for it to be reasonable. One of them. But the problem is, like, Dark Blast by itself is not a good card. And I think that's where the conversation, at least to me, kind of derails. Because now you're arguing for a not good card to be in your deck on the off chance that you get this kind of value 3-card combo that again may or may not be lethal. And I just feel like that's asking a lot. All right, I think I want the draw. Well, do I? Maybe I want the land more. I want to be preordaining. But I guess if I miss on the draw, I might still want to Prismatic Ending the construct. Couple constructs with a, what's it called? Couple constructs with a cookbook can go pretty wild. Be a little awkward if they're able to get this Cannoneer down. Soul, what's up? Ketramose is pretty dope. I've been enjoying casting some Ketramose. Ketramoses. Traumases. I feel like this is going to be one of those situations where we try to pronounce this card and we're all just going to end up being completely off. Like we're over here saying Ketramose and it's probably like Ketramose or something. We just have no point of reference. Traumase. Got a food. You've got an Asmarano Mordecai Sinakuldakar. Pelucranos all over again. Exactly. Like, is it Pelucranos? Is it Polycranos? Is it... What do we call you? No. No. Why? Why you gotta do this to me? This pest control is about to go ham. Dang it. Sippa Lippa, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. Appreciate you coming around and hanging out. All right. So, like, I get down my indestructible god that's pretty good into Asmo, but I'm not happy about it. If I put the Ketramose on the stack, I'm assuming they go ahead and discard the Kappa Cannoneer and shoot the frog. I could jump the frog and attack first, but I'd lose out on a draw if they let me resolve the Ketramose. The special K. But like if I fly the frog and attack and they discard the Kappa Cannoneer and I just ditch my whole hand to the frog. I feel like I'm not that upset about it. Maybe. I guess I don't have to decide anything until they actually activate Asmo targeting the frog. And then if they shoot the frog, I've got to just go all in on the frog, right? Or I hate this so much. Like, I could play the Ketramose and have Cling to Dust next turn to get the Ketramose online and draw another card and then just have Counterspell and probably win and be fine. Or I could go all in on this frog, and the only thing I think I don't beat is a Fatal Push off the top. But Ketramose probably beats a Fatal Push. I do get to draw a card off the frog. Man. It's like if I had one more card and could guarantee I kept Counterspell, this is the easiest discard of my life. We're going to try out Ketramose. And I get like absurdly punished for this. I know who to blame. Blame chat. So let's exile something. I guess I can Fatal Push and just attack. No, I have to exile something to be able to attack. Get a cookbook. Was America. Thank you. Swinging with Ketramose. So, funnily enough, we would have won if we had just gone all in on the frog. So we would have hit the fatal push to take out their frog and just had another big flying attacker. I don't know why they played this instead of cookbook it. Probably doesn't really matter. We are racing in Asmo fairly well. We get our meticulous archive. Sure. Nobody's ever complained about just having more cards. So hit you with our Ketramose, play the frog. You go to 1. Draw a card. Discard some stuff to the frog. And then we're going to draw a card. And yeah, we'll just say go. I got counter spell. So yeah, I think that turn with frog, probably better to just go all in on the frog because I think it makes them have exactly. Daredevil's fine. I think it makes them have exactly fatal push right then and there that turn, or they die. Not that I think Ketramose gives them like many more draws. It's just they have multiple draws to find something where Frog is now. So this is kill the frog, hard cast the 4-mana dude. We counterspell it, they die. Ooh. Opponent does not realize just yet that Ketramose has menace and there's more frogs. Yay. Bunch of 2-0s, which is cool, but at the same time, those include like NeoBrand. Hard to get an accurate judge when you play NeoBrand. Frog number 3. Counterspell, Thought Scour, Unearth, Brazen Borrower. I'll just take Counterspell so I can be sure I resolve this Preordain on 2. Seems reasonable. Also kind of incentivizes them to go main phase Thought Scour here to try to get an Oculus. They do not. I would love to naturally draw a land. And by land, I clearly meant Force of Negation. Go. I really hope they surveil over something good here, like an Oculus or a Frog. I guess not an Oculus. Well, if they don't have the 3rd land, then yeah, I hope they'd surveil over an Oculus. But if they had the 3rd land, I would not want them to surveil over an Oculus because I probably couldn't deal with them just hard casting it. All right, we're gonna cycle this this Unearth. Feels like a hard cast Oculus. And the Unearth. Just all kinds of rude. Mm. Probably a world where I let them have that and then prismatic ending it on my turn. I shot the sheriff. Could you please not shoot my psychic frog? No, 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 no. Draw step. Going to petty theft. Sure. Are you intending to counterspell? Okay. Blue to Delta in the graveyard. Blind draw off of the consider. I would prefer not to go down 2 cards to deal with this. We're going to have a frog war. All right. We are the advantageous frog because we have Cling to Dust in the graveyard. We're going to discard a frog to grow our frog. See if they do the same. They do. And now we will Cling to Dust something. One, two, three. Get rid of some frogs since I don't have Unearth. Ah. The true frog power has won. Please don't have a fatal push. Harbinger. Harbinger's not bad here. Like, locking me out of black is a non-zero amount of concern. Or do they have Harbinger into Murktide? 2, 3, 4. That makes life a lot tougher. That makes life a lot tougher indeed. So I can Ghost Vacuum their Oculus. I don't have to chump block this turn. Okay. They don't have to block this. Do I have to jump the frog and attack? Like, is my only out to find a land for this ghost vacuum? So I'm not dead if I pass. Not in a great spot, but not dead. I think I need to play to try to top deck a Murktide of my own. Harbinger into Murktide. That's a rough series of draws right there. Normally, like, not very high on the list of draw sequences that would really punish me. How are we feeling without the Unearth package plus Oculus over Murktide? It's funny because at the moment, my only like losses this league have been to opposing Murktides, not opposing Oculus, not opposing Ketramose, just actual factual Murktide. But as far as like being a Ketramose shell, I think the traditional build is better. You just have more spots that you can kind of devote towards making Ketramose good. I think the Oculus build does a better job of getting Oculus or getting Ketramose into play, but if you're not exiling stuff after that, it doesn't really matter that it's just on the battlefield. Dark, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. I kind of wish some cards like what was that green black grizzly salvage? I wish some cards like that were more playable. That would be kind of cool in like an Oculus shell. Grizzly salvage, get back some good threat. Put some stuff in the yard. But you just can't really afford to have setup turns anymore without doing something in addition to your setup turn. Your setup turn's got to be like an overlord. Part of me feels like I should just be jamming Ketramose here. Like, jam Ketramose, make them have the counter spell. Next turn, Murktide plus, like, Spell Snare. Like, this could be Brazen Borrower or Shoot the Sheriff or something. In which case, just jamming the Ketramose looks a lot better. Like, if I'm in an open list event and take note of the fact that my opponent doesn't have counterspell, I'm jamming this Ketramose 100% of the time right here. No questions asked. Obviously, that's a little bit different than a closed list event, but you get the idea. Now, do I just want to jam a Murktide and draw a card? Ah. I see why you didn't counter the Ketramose now. Kept something on top, and they didn't play it. What would you keep on top and not play? Counterspell, Oculus, push. I can take the counterspell, and that lets me resolve the vacuum for free. I like that. That involves drawing a card. I guess we just pass back. Don't think there's a world that I'm ever firing off this surgical extraction on a mystical dispute, but I guess I could fire off the surgical extraction just to be able to get the Murktide down. I know their hand. Yeah. This also gets the Ketramose online. That also gets Ketramose online and draws a card. So, thank you, I guess. My discarding. Just push. Probably could have discarded a frog. I don't think it matters too terribly much right here. You know, 5 of their 7. At the moment, it doesn't seem like they have an answer to Ketramose. Start by swinging in. So if they have something like a Brazen Borrower, they want to use it now. I'll discard the frog this time. Opponent appears to be going for a Murktide Regent. I guess it could be an Oculus. Yeah, they've got the Oculus in hand, so it makes sense that it's an Oculus. Or Thought Scour there means they should have picked up the land already. Either they drew a land or they drew a Murktide. That's like the only reason that you would fire off the Thought Scour there. You don't want to risk not having the mana to cast the Oculus. If they have the Murktide, we have Counterspell. They might have Spell Snare back, in which case we're just racing with the Ketramose. If they have Oculus, they tap out for Oculus. We can Counterspell, we can Fatal Push, whatever. Since they already played their land. We know we are free to Fatal Push. All right. So Ketramose absolutely ran away with that game. Not always the case, but is cool to see when it happens. I'm tempted to cut more prismatic endings and bring back in some forces. I've got a bunch of answers to unearth. Seems reasonable. Borrower, counterspell, sync, pick lock. I think we'll take a pick lock prankster, say go. I guess we get to see whether or not they're willing to use up a counterspell on this Dreams. If not, we get to take Brazen Borrower, exile the pick lock for what it's worth, but we don't really care about that being in the yard. And it has picked up a Mystical Dispute. So their hand is sync, counterspell, Mystical Dispute. Am I just forcing the action on one of these counter spells? I am. Maybe could have waited on that frog, but I need to hit like multiple land drops. I really don't want to be hitting land drops here. So what would they have drawn that they wanted to play out a spring? Probably going to take that other Vanishing Verse instead of getting a Surveil land here. I think that's better than a random draw. Be like an additional answer into a potential Murktide or something. A little bit surprised they didn't cycle or like stamp cycling on the bottom of this card somewhere. See if they sink me back. Them sinking me back here, really good for me. Now I've got Vanishing Verse to hopefully just exile it. Also not the most threatening Murktide in the world at the moment. Did have the Oculus. All right. Stern Scolding, an Oculus in the graveyard, so Unearth is a potential good draw for them. Pretty good draw for me. 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's a Murktide. Go. Now, if they top deck and Unearth, I've got Vanishing Verse to hit the Oculus. I'll Spell Snare the Frog. I don't think there's anything 2-drop. All right, I was gonna say I don't think there's much 2-drop wise that I care about countering now that I've got the Murktide down. So I think I want to have the Fatal Push in hand in case they do manage to like get an Oculus down, have an answer to the Vanishing Verse. All I need to do is top deck like a fetch land and I can push the Oculus, but I can't do anything about it with Spell Snare in hand. Okay. So ended up that league 4-1. Solid league. Lost a mirror match once, beat a mirror match once. But both, it looked like we're not on Ketramose list, just like traditional Oculus or Oculus, not traditional. There were some games that Ketramose just took over. Several games Ketramose just took over in that league, which is always super cool to see. Feel like we should have had a better match against the mirror that first time around. We do have Thoughtseizes, Ghost Vacuums, Pendings, Ketramose. But sometimes it doesn't play out that way. If you're expecting a bunch of mirrors in like your local meta, then you can always run some number of Mystical Dispute in the board. Probably in the spots that like Surgical is taking, but I don't know how good or bad it would be. We did see Harbinger against Eldrazi. One of the big test points for this league was if we could bring in Harbinger and Consign over like Ketramose and Prismatic Ending against Eldrazi, and we got to bring in Harbinger and see it and like lock our Eldrazi opponent out of the game with it. So really nice to see when a plan comes together like that. The other questionable slots, Dreams of Steel and Oil, we saw once, and we got to, what was it? Exile a Brazen Borrower from hand and a Picklock Prankster from the yard. So it was like okay, but not great. Cling was really good. Cling to Dust. Stern Sculling. What's my sideboard plan against Eldrazi? I think it needs to be in with like these 10. Sorry. These 10. The Consigns, Harbinger, Stony, Surgical. And out with. Move these over. Out with the Stern Scoldings, Fatal Push, Prismatic Endings, and like 2 Ketramose. Okay. So I kind of like that. I just kept forgetting that Stern Scolding was in the deck and needed to come out in the matchup. So that's probably something I'll have to write down for myself going forward. Any other notes on this list? No Oculus on Earth. I think that I feel like we had this this question come up a few times. Oculus is better for getting Ketramose into play. It's not better for taking advantage of Ketramose being on the battlefield and like Ketramose having abilities. Traditional Murktide is not as good at getting Ketramose into play since you can't cheat it in. You got to hard cast it. But it is significantly better at letting you abuse Ketramose's abilities to draw cards because you have more flex spots in your main that you can put towards exile-based interaction instead of having to use those spots on Oculus or on Unearth and Thought Scour and Consider and stuff like that. That being said, we have played with Esper and Ketramose. So I'm not saying this off of some just like baseless opinion, but it's really tough to fit Ketramose and like exile effects into a shell that has got to devote a certain amount of space to things that don't help Ketramose. Oculus just like, or traditional, the Frogtide build just has less space that needs to be devoted to like making Murktide good. I might consider going up to a third Murktide. I was on 3, didn't really like it, cut down to 2. But if I do something like trim a vacuum or add another Dreams of Steel and Oil or something, I kind of like having one more threat. Gives like that rounded out 10 number. Right now we are only on 9 threats, which is pretty light when you're needing to see them at least once per game. We'll see how it goes going forward.